Welcome. This is the Naboisho podcast, a podcast of the Naboisho Leadership Institute. Now here on Naboisho, we gather under the acacia tree, which is our place for reflection, for listening, and for honest conversations about the journeys young people navigate as they move through life, through education, and through work. The first season, which is this season, is recorded while the Institute is still in formation. And therefore, this has been a listening season, a space to reflect on the realities young people face, and the questions that must be understood before anything new is built. So as the Institute is in formation, as we are building our programs, we are doing this via listening. We have been listening, and we are glad you're here with us and that you've been listening with us. Now, our core thesis for this particular episode is to say that listening reveals patterns. So we have been listening all through the season, and we've seen patterns. And what those patterns have done is that patterns reveal responsibility. So it's not just about listening. To what end? For us, it is towards understanding what are our responsibilities. And we've been saying all through this season that the chief responsibility of older generations is to create pathways for coming generations. So it's our responsibility, it's our duty as older generations to create patterns, to create pathways, to create space for young people, just as was done for us. Now, so these patterns reveal responsibility. So we want to start this by naming what has emerged throughout the entire season. So we have seen some patterns emerge as across the season. And one of the things that we have seen through listening and through having this conversation is that the first thing is that young people are not disengaged. They're waiting, they're preparing, they're adapting, and they're navigating structural delays. And sometimes we even dare say structural decay. And we've also seen, in a nutshell, that identity, dignity, and participation are deeply connected. And we've also come to the realization across the entire season that transitions are not just logistical, they're psychological. So with every transition, and this is actually, it's a psychological fact. If you talk to psychologists and even psychiatrists, they will tell you that the most intense, in terms of your psychology, your emotion, the most intense moments for any human being is moments of transition. And so if you are beginning the process of doing a psychological evaluation, one of the questions that are asked is, what transitions have you experienced in the last year, for example? For example, have you graduated from school? Have you just had a baby? Have you just gotten married, because that's also a transition? Have you moved houses? Just the process of removing things from one house and moving to a different house can be extremely psychologically jarring. You're asked, have you had a relationship breakdown or a marriage breakdown? Have you undergone a divorce? So these are some of the things. And of course, this this institute is being built on the premise of youth transitions. And so these transitions, to get back to the point, are not just logistical, they are deeply psychological. And so let's start with the belonging question, which we have been discussing across the season. Belonging has emerged as a central theme. Young people are asking, where do I fit as a young person? Where do we fit as young people? Where are we needed? Where are we recognized? Where are our voices heard? And where are we being given space? These are the questions that young people are asking. Belonging is a central theme. And it's not just emotional. Belonging is not just emotional. It is structural. It's not that young people need to feel like they belong. The structures in place must show them, demonstrate to them that they belong. And it requires participation. If we do not give space to young people in our societies, in our communities, to participate, then they will not belong. It's not just a matter of, is it emotional? Am I feeling? It's not about just the feeling. It's about the structures, and it's about the participation. We keep telling young people about community. But what does that mean to them if they cannot participate in that community outside the prescribed boundaries the older generations are confining them to? So participation is not about drawing boundaries and telling young people, this is the space where you are allowed to operate in. It's about saying this is the community. The community is as big as we imagine it to be, and allowing them to participate. So participation to us, and as we've listened across the entire season, it must be two-way, and it must be continuous, and it must be inclusive. And I know we've used two-way, we've used continuous and inclusive. What does this mean? It means that we, the older generations, we, the people that are sitting in spaces of power, authority, etc., we must create space. And after creating that space, we must step away from that space and allow our young people to safely try, safely fail, and try again and again and again until they get it right. That is the purpose of the social safety net. And we have seen across the season that one of the things that we have taken away from our young people is the social safety net, where failure is fatal. We've said this in a previous episode on this season, that for many young people, we have made them believe through our actions, through our words, and through the way we have structured the community and structured things, that failure is fatal, that there's no room to fail. You make one mistake and you're done. And so there's no social safety net for young people to make a mistake and still keep the job, to not show up in a certain way because you've not trained them to show up that way, but still welcome them and coach them to show up better. We no longer have the patience, the space to do that. And what we are saying here at the Naboisho Institute is that these spaces are spaces that we must. There is need for us to provide those spaces and step away. Allow young people to try, to fail, and try again. Failure must not be fatal. It must not be fatal. We've also looked at length in one of the episodes of the season, the generational responsibility. And we have agreed that every generation inherits responsibility. And older generations ideally are supposed to build what exists today. And even structurally, if you walk around, for example, the Nairobi Central Business District, you will see buildings like the National Archive, for example, that was built sometime in the previous century. And the fact that it's standing there is testament to the fact that people that we never met, people that came before us, built these things, constructed these buildings and left them for us to use today. And of course, now it's our duty to make sure that we do proper maintenance on these structures to make sure that subsequent generations find them. So every generation inherits responsibility, and older generations built what exists today. And therefore, younger generations will build what comes next. But generational continuity requires handover, not clinging onto power and youth. What is required is handover. And we have seen, as we've gone through this season and we've been listening, that when handover slows down, belonging also weakens. Now, we live in a community of, whether it's we want to talk about the Kenyan community, whether you want to talk about urban communities or African communities in general, where older generations have, in some way, have become reluctant to step into their eldership roles, into the role of the elder, and hand over power and space and opportunity to younger generations. And I'll give you an example. It's become increasingly difficult to tell, when somebody stands up in public and you're told that this person is 80 years old, and you're looking at them and they've got black hair, et cetera, et cetera. And this is not to say that there's anything wrong with dyeing hair. It is that because we live in a hyper-capitalized system where your value is hinged on your remaining young, whether in appearance, whether in speech, for example. And then stepping into the eldership role, stepping into elderhood, if we are to phrase it that way, is seen as a form of retirement, a form of the individual becoming irrelevant, becoming useless, becoming tired. Because now you're told you're old and tired, you're aging, you're creasing. So then it means that because people do not want to be relegated into the dustbins of history, relegated into uselessness, we are clinging more and more on youth, the appearance of youth, the semblance of youth. And what that means then is that youth themselves are coming into this space, into being fully young, and they're finding a lot of older generations stuck there, because to move into the elder role is no longer something that is respected, is no longer something that is seen in a positive light. It is seen as being relegated into irrelevance, which is very unfortunate, because a society cannot only thrive on the young. We must have people in the community that are holding the wisdom of the age, that are handing over nuggets of wisdom, of knowledge, not from the periphery necessarily, but it also doesn't have to be always at the center. And so because this is the kind of communities, these are the societies we've created as a people, it becomes increasingly difficult. It becomes increasingly almost impossible for us to have a clear system of handing over. And when that handover slows down, what we're seeing is that a lot of weakening belonging. And remember, we've said that belonging is something that is vital, is something that is continuous, is something that is participatory. And that is what we are seeing that is being lost. However, this can be restored. It's not that saying that we're at the world's end right now and we can't not do anything about it. We can restore that belonging. We can restore the social order. And that will require everybody to come together and to work together. And so I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about why the Naboisho Leadership Institute as an entity exists. First of all, what is the meaning of Naboisho? Nabo is the Maasai word for the number one. And so Naboisho means oneness, a coming together in unity, a coming together for a common purpose. And the Naboisho Leadership Institute is therefore formed under the ethos of oneness, unity, a common purpose, specifically in supporting and working with young people as they become. Our tagline or our motto is, where becoming begins. And when we think about becoming, we can frame it. We can think about the famous book by Michelle Obama, Becoming, where she spoke about three forms, or she speaks about three forms of becoming. Becoming me, which is focusing on the individual. Because if we don't have individuals becoming something, becoming themselves, coming to the place where they realize, these are the gifts I came here with. This is the purpose I came here for. These are the gifts that I carry from my lineage, from my parentage. And this is what I bring to the communal table. That is the premise we must start from. And so for us at the Leadership Institute, it's about working with young people and supporting them through the process of first becoming me, to focus on the individual, on their gifts. What gifts did they come with? Who are you as an individual? And then the second form of becoming is becoming us. Focusing on partnerships, focusing on the community, on work, on friendships. Once you find out who you are as an individual, then you have to ask yourself, how do I fit in to a larger ecosystem? Who am I as a member of the community? Who am I as a member of my country? Who am I as a member of my ethnic group? Who am I as a member of many other groups? Whether it's your religious group, your ethnic group, your familial group. Who are you in relation to the rest of the people around you? So that's about becoming us. This individual then focuses on, where do I fit in the wider community? And the final level of becoming is becoming more. Focusing on purpose, focusing on a larger platform. As I am the individual and I fit into this partnership, this small group, who am I then even on the global platform? Who am I? How do I become more? And you can only get to becoming more once you start on becoming me, on the individual. So that is the ethos. For us at the Naboisho Leadership Institute, we focus on the transitions of young people as they become in these contexts. Our work is hinged on supporting young people with life, soft leadership skills. They need to accompany them into life, into adulthood, and into adulting, as we like to say, based on the theory of the transitional or liminal space. We find that a lot of these transitional spaces are either quite limited, in some spaces have been erased, or have been, they're quite small, and there isn't enough space. So the transition into adulthood has been overtaken by life under capitalism. We expect young people to intuitively know how to adult, when we have seen that that's not possible. You cannot intuitively learn how to be a parent, or learn how to be a CEO, or learn how to be a manager, or learn how to be a worker. Somebody has to teach you. Somebody has to show you the rope. And this is why education is so important. You cannot just intuitively learn that 1 + 1 is 2 as a very small child. Somebody has to put 2 oranges on the table and you count them, and then these are 2. And then you begin to understand addition and subtraction and etc. So it's not, some things are not intuitive. We have to be taught how to do these things and to know these things. So we have put together systems and programs that support these transitions into dignified adult lives post-school. And our aim is to impact thousands of young Africans over the next up to 10 years. But why? Why are we doing this now? Based on this listening season, we've seen that something is breaking. And for a long time, there was an unspoken promise. You study hard, you work hard, you do the right things, there would be space for you. And today, that promise feels less certain. Why? Because the structures that absorbed young people, education, employment, institutions, are themselves under tremendous strain. So education no longer guarantees work. Work no longer guarantees stability. You could be having a job, you could be having 2 jobs, and you still find that it's not enough rope to last you an entire month. And stability no longer guarantees dignity. So the Naboisho Leadership Institute exists because we cannot continue pretending that the old pathways still function the way they once did, and we must build new ones. Young people are also carrying historic levels of uncertainty. We have discussed how every generation faces difficulty, but this one is navigating multiple shifts at once. We are now in the era of the polycrisis, economic uncertainty, climate anxiety, political instability, technological transformation. We now live in 2026 in an era where AI is beginning to self-protect, self-propagate in that sense. And young people are doing all of this under constant visibility. Their lives are public, their progress is public, their struggles are public. And this has created a severe psychological weight that previous generations did not carry in the same way. So Naboisho exists to create spaces where young people do not have to carry that weight alone. The third point is that the crisis is not capability. The crisis young people face is not that they're not capable. They don't lack intelligence, young people don't lack creativity, young people don't lack ambition. What is often missing is those pathways, that accompaniment. Guidance that does not control, support that does not diminish autonomy, and institutions that do not treat them as though they were problems to be fixed. And so the Naboisho Leadership Institute exists to restore that accompaniment, to work with young people as they build lives in a world that is still forming, that is still becoming for them. Many in the older generation are being accused of trying to dismantle processes and structures that they benefited from. At Naboisho, we are saying we're here to help them build upon those systems, because for them, they're still becoming, the world is still forming. The fourth point is that the greatest loss, and we discussed this in one of the episodes, is not just economic. The greatest loss or impact is that on dignity. When transitions stall, as we have discussed and we have seen and listened, young people begin to internalize failure. And when the barriers, especially when the barriers are structural, when the system itself is constrained. So what you're seeing and what we've seen in this season is that young people begin to believe that they are the problem. But young people are not the problem. They're responding intelligently to complex realities. And so, the Naboisho Leadership Institute exists to restore dignity as the foundation upon which agency, leadership, and contribution can grow. Dignity first. Everything else builds from there. And I will say that again. Dignity first. Dignity is the foundation upon which agency, leadership, and contribution can grow. The fifth point is that every generation must eventually pass the baton. Societies have thrived on generational transition. Older generations build, younger generations inherit and extend. And societies will stagnate when this is interrupted, when transitions have stalled, and when power does not circulate. And it's not because young people are not ready. It's because space has not been intentionally created within which they can fail and fail until they get it right. So the Nabuisho Leadership Institute exists to support healthy generational transition. And this is not just about disruption. We are doing this through preparation, through dialogue, and institutional renewal. The sixth point is that listening is where rebuilding begins. So this season was not about providing answers. It was about listening and even posing questions, pondering on the questions that we were also posing. Listening to uncertainty, listening to dignity, listening to identity, and listening to complexity. Because sometimes what we tend to do is we flatten youth. We place young people in a box, we give them tags, we give them labels, and we just flatten them. We don't give young people the benefit of complexity. Now, listening is where trust begins, and trust is where institutions are rebuilt. So the Nabuisho Leadership Institute exists first as a listening institution. Before we design programs, we listen. Before we propose solutions, we listen. Because the future cannot be designed without those who will live inside it. So if we purport to be building a future for young people, how can we build it without them? That is impossible, because we will not outlive young people. We will leave this place and we will leave this world to them. And so if we are going to build the future, we cannot design it and build it without those who will live inside it. The seventh point is that Nabuisho is not reacting to young people. We are building with them. So this is not an intervention that is imposed from above. It is an institution that is emerging from lived reality. And one of the things that we have noted in our society is that these transitions from one state to another. And in one of the episodes, we've even spoken about when transitions are not direct. It's not that I finished school and then I got stuck. It could be that somebody, my parent died and I became an orphan and I could not continue with school. Or I became pregnant and I had to drop out of school. So from what we're doing this from what has been heard, from what has been observed, and from what has been carried by young people. And we're doing the building of this very deliberately, very carefully, with the understanding that institutions don't just shape opportunity, we also shape belief. Belief in what's possible, belief in what is deserved, and belief in what can be built. All this will come from institutions, and we have seen that in the segment, in the episode where we spoke about young people and how they view institutions. And so, in closing, Nabuisho Leadership Institute exists because this generation does not need saving. It doesn't need saving. It needs space. It needs accompaniment. It needs institutions that recognize its dignity, intelligence, and its role in shaping what comes next. This is why Nabuisho exists. And for us, this is only the beginning. Thank you for listening and for being a part of this early conversation. As we wind down this season, it's been our first season, recorded under the acacia tree, which is where we gather, while the Nabuisho Leadership Institute is in formation. Thank you for listening with us. Thank you for listening in. I have been your host, Caroline Mose, and we will see you next time right here under the acacia tree. Thank you and goodbye.